Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. It is time for another no buy update and the month of February is complete. It always seems to go by so quickly. I think with it being a shorter month anyway, but with January feeling so long. I know there's only 3 days difference in between, but it has gone so quickly and I'm in a really good mood today because the sun was up before 7 and we know that I don't get on well with the waking up in the dark. So I only had like an hour before the sun came up and you know, you can sort of like feel it spring in the air. And it's the first time in months that I've been able to film a video in the evening after work because it's still light and I finish work an hour earlier on Fridays. And so that has just meant I can actually film a video because there are still daylight hours. So really loving that, really feeling the approach of spring. And honestly, it makes such a difference to my mood. I was speaking to someone at work the other day about how we are weather people and that we really shouldn't be, especially living in Britain where the weather can be really rubbish a lot of the time. If your mood is kind of linked to that, then that's not a good thing. But we can feel spring in the air and everything is feeling much better and brighter now. So in from work, camera out, that's why I'm a bit sort of work dressed. But let's bring some no buy updates for the month of February. Again, I really liked last time touching on those areas of temptation, those areas that I nearly bought things in but didn't, because I've never really talked about that in a no buy series before. But I think it's interesting to have those conversations. And so I'd be really interested to know from you down in the comments if there are things that you are more tempted by or you feel like you keep being tempted by. Maybe you're resisting and you haven't bought, or maybe in fact you have been tempted and did buy. I'd be really interested to know the sorts of things that other people are drawn towards, but they're the sort of things that they're also able to be like, no, put the brakes on. Let's have a think about that before sort of jumping in head first. So for me, there's not been a lot of change. It's only been a month. But one thing that continues to be an area of Charlotte put the brakes on is wardrobe, and we were successful. We did not buy any clothes or any accessories or anything this month, although I spent far too much time on my phone on the website for Fable England, which is a brand that do all sorts of different accessories, but the most beautiful sort of countryside-esque bags in like pastel colours and other colours as well, but those are the sort of springtime vibes I was drawn to. And you know, it took a lot of willpower to not purchase those things, especially considering they wouldn't necessarily tie in with my capsule wardrobe anyway. And then of course it gets the ideas flowing, well, what if I sort of made my wardrobe go a little bit this way, so that sort of vibe would be there. And I even got to the point where I was sat at my computer mood boarding things that I can add into my already existing capsule wardrobe. What do I want the spring vibes to look like? And whilst I am aware that I'm looking for something not wildly different, my style is very sort of timeless, traditional-ish. I would like a bit more sort of springtime's softer, more feminine vibes, because a lot of my wardrobe is like this, which is quite sharp, especially for work and things like that. By the way, if you can hear a rattling in the background, it's a very, very windy day, and that causes my letterbox to rattle, and so I do apologise for that. But with this one, I think it just comes back to when I talked about bread makers last time, which I have moved on from. I think now I'm back at work and busy again and I can sort of be realistic about the amount of free time I actually have. Bread makers are definitely off the table, but I think it's very similar to that in the sense that there will be new wardrobe items in my life at some point. It will happen. It happens for all of us. It's just now is not that time. Now is not the time for me to be jumping in and sort of reinventing that and spending money when I've not got a clear idea. If I'm perfectly honest, I'm not happy with my body at the minute and the size I am because I've let habits slip a little bit. I've been poorly recently and just really busy, and you know, over Christmas and the winter, I have been slowing down a lot more and in that sense listening to my body, but that has meant there have been some changes which I'm not 100% happy with, and so that's something that I would like to correct before I then spend money on clothes. And so there's the whole sizes thing, and I've noticed a lot of things in my wardrobe currently are a little bit snug, and so, you know, I would like those to be comfortable again, because that is like my whole capsule wardrobe. So it's just not the right time to sort of be branching out into a new wardrobe. And the only other area of temptation, if you like, I did mention last time, and it's still there, and it's one of those things that's coming up a lot on my feeds on all my social medias, in terms of I've fed the algorithm and now I'm getting a lot of it. But I talked last time about gardening, and specifically the idea of growing your own sort of fruits, veggies and stuff. And we've been there. I sort of threw myself in at the deep end during lockdown. It did not go well. I am not a very good gardener, to be honest. It's one of those things that requires more time than I have. It's probably one of those things that requires more patience than I have. But I am also acutely aware that that's the person I want to become, or that's the lifestyle I am leaning towards later down the line. More towards this idea of traditional homemaking, and if some of that comes from growing some of my own veggies, then I'm not against that. Again, at the right time in my life, when that time comes, when I've got a bit more time to commit to that. But I've been reading a lot from people's blogs and things, and watching a lot of videos from people that do this sort of thing on a much bigger scale. And they always say, start with one thing. And so I am going to let myself have one thing that I start to grow. And if I want to expand that and do like one thing every month, that's okay. I imagine after a few months I would be like, oh, it's too many things to look after. And so I'd probably stop. But the idea being that there's only a point in growing anything that you use a lot. So if I think about the sort of veggies and whatnot that we use the most, it's things like potatoes and carrots, broccoli, onions, tomatoes in sauces, which, you know, those are all fine. You can grow them here in the UK, and a lot of them you can grow in pots, so there's options there. However, the one thing I'm going to let myself start growing, because I think it grows quite quickly, it grows back when you trim it, and would be very useful to us because of how much money we currently spend on it, is parsley, which might sound a bit bonkers. When I say we're spending a lot of money on it, it's because we buy like the little bags of it from the supermarket, which aren't expensive themselves, they're about 60p, and we buy 3 or 4 every week. So over time that's going to add up. So if that's a cost I could just cut out because I'm growing my own, then that'd be great. And the reason we're getting through so much parsley, I don't particularly like parsley, it's not even for us, it's for our guinea pigs. It's like their herb of choice, it's the one they really like. And so if I can start growing parsley, then I guess that's one less thing to buy at the supermarket, and it's manageable. It's only one thing to look after, but my brain has been, let's start making planters out of pallets, and let's go to the garden centre and get all these things. And I have really had to put the brakes on myself and be like, no, we've been here before, be realistic. So I've not gone mad and bought loads of gardening stuff for another month. We've survived. Which brings me on to the flip side though of what I did buy, and I let myself buy a packet of seeds, parsley seeds. Everything else I will need to grow the parsley, like little planters and trays and compost and even like a trowel and stuff and a water spray bottle. I already own those things, so I didn't have to get anything else. So I spent £2.99 on a packet of seeds. And that is my one thing of gardening for the month if I want to do that in March. So that was that. Things that are repeated from last month. So I had 2 horse riding lessons this month, and they were £37 each. That's £37 for an hour, and Tom and I went together for those. And we have had the badminton courts booked twice as well. So that did work out quite nicely. I touched on last time how we're going to do like alternating every fortnight, just because we have a lot of things that we enjoy to do and we want to get in, but getting everything in every week was not only really expensive, but then finding the time to do it was basically impossible. So we've been alternating, and that's a much better balance. And the badminton courts, they have gone up in price, and they charge £12.05 for the hour. So that was twice we did that. I also had my haircut, which was £15, and that's been 14 weeks since my last haircut, so I'm probably going to try and go about the same amount of time. It was meant to be 13 weeks, so one every quarter if you like, and because I booked in a trip, I just had to push it back a week, so it ended up being 14 weeks, and so I booked in again for 13 weeks time, and it was just the right amount of time that like the ends were starting to split and stuff, and it's not always been great with the growing it out and the split ends and all of that. So hopefully now I can just keep on top of it, keep that nice sort of blunt straight edge. And I changed hair salons the last time I got it cut, because the one I was going to originally were increasing their rates and going up to £30 just for a dry cut, which for me I think is so expensive. When I've got such fine hair, I'm literally in the chair about 10 minutes. All they have to do is like cut an edge, like tidy up my little bits of fringe because it's not as long, and I'm done. My appointment I had for my haircut started at past, and I was back in my car for 1:45, and that includes like paying and rebooking in. So for me, a £30 cut was just too expensive, and it's not like I needed a particular stylist to do it. It's quite a simple thing to do. So I changed to a different salon just because they were much more affordable, only charge £15, and that just seemed better for the amount of time and I guess technique that is needed to cut my hair. So that's good. I've also bought some spring flowers throughout the month, which I think appeared in various videos. So I did mention I really enjoyed bringing the spring in, and now today feels so much better. I don't know if I'll necessarily feel like I need to continue that. It was almost like me trying to bring spring sooner than it actually was, and I wanted things in the house that made me feel like spring because I get so much more energy and positivity off that spring vibe. So over the course of the month, I bought 4 little bunches of daffodils just from the supermarket and a bunch of multicoloured tulips. And the daffodils are 89 pence a bunch and the tulips were £2.99. So altogether that was less than £7 on spring flowers. And they did just brighten the place up a little bit, but I haven't got any at the moment. I let the last lot sort of go over whilst I was away last week, and then I just haven't bought any since. Another thing on my list, which, you know, isn't really something for me, it's not something to stay in my space, but it is an area of spending, and that was Easter eggs for my family. Haven't they got expensive? When we saw the price of some of them, we collectively agreed that we would set a £5 per person budget, and so we wouldn't be buying like the normal size ones that everyone's selling for £7 now, that we'd just buy like the littler ones, and that would be fine because we couldn't believe how expensive they were. At this point it is just cheaper and more cost effective to buy like a bar of chocolate, and so I did buy Easter eggs for all the family, which for all the people I buy for in my family was just under £40 to do that. And then the only other thing was our trip away. So we had a week off work and we went up to Craythorne Hall again, where I had planned to film lots of my videos and that didn't happen. We'd already booked the trip. We went from Sunday, we went straight after church, got in the car and headed up north, and we stayed through to Wednesday afternoon before coming home to be home for Wednesday evening. And the trip itself was booked and paid for in advance, so I don't have the cost for that. We paid for it in December before the new year. However, we did have food whilst we were there to pay for. And as I said, I had planned to film lots of videos, and the whole point was, like, don't get me wrong, we weren't going to do anything strenuous. The whole point of this trip was to have a break from work, get away, countryside manor house, lots of walks through like the woodlands and around the grounds, treat ourselves to some nice food, have quiet time in the hotel to read. I wanted to catch up on a bit of Bible reading because I was a few weeks behind because busy. I think I've skipped 4 weeks now in total since I started in September. So I did want to play catch up a little bit, and this week I have got back into it, which I'm glad of. And I fell ill, which was nice, which, you know, does sometimes happen when you work so hard and you take a break, it suddenly hits you. But I started to get like a little bit of a scratchy throat on the Saturday. Sunday morning I wasn't feeling great, but, you know, fine, well enough to go to church and then go and then do the drive up there. Tom drove, and by the Sunday night I was full of cold, and it was a really brutal one. It took me so long to shake it. In fact, I'm still a little bit sniffly, So every morning we were there, we went down to breakfast, I had a bit of breakfast, and then we just left the room for long enough for housekeeping to come and like do the room over. So that's when we went for like short walks in the woodlands, but we weren't out for more than an hour every morning. And then we just came back to the hotel and I got back in bed, and sometimes I read books and sometimes I just fell asleep. And I planned for it to be like a tech detox as well. Like last time we went, I put my phone in a drawer and didn't click on it, but because I literally just needed some like mind-numbing entertainment, in the end I was on my phone like scrolling and stuff, and so that was a bit of a shame because I didn't feel well and I planned to be there, so I suppose I did rest, but it was sad that that happened. And then I took all my camera and everything and had planned to film loads of videos and I didn't get to, so never mind, you win some, you lose some. That was already paid for in advance, but we did have to pay for food, drinks and everything else whilst we were there for the 4 days we were. And altogether we had to buy lunches, dinners, drinks, and we did have a treat ourselves to a few puddings as well whilst we were there. And then they do you a little bill at the end. One of the days we ordered lunch to the room because I felt so poorly I couldn't even go downstairs and get it, so we ordered room service, which, you know, comes with an extra charge, and then they tot up all your bill at the end. And then we noticed every time we'd ordered something, you know, there's a service charge on, and they were all adding up. So by the time we were done, just for those 4 days, we had spent over £250 on just food and drink and the charges that come with it. So in my head I want to say like that was a little bit more expensive than I was expecting, but then I think honestly, what was I expecting? I've been here before, I've seen the prices, I know exactly what it's like. And so actually it probably shouldn't have been a surprise at all. And that was it. So in terms of the saving money, like my savings have gone out as normal. I've not had to change that in order to fund this month. And I haven't brought anything physical into my space except a packet of seeds and Easter eggs, but you know, they'll be sent away. And so all in all, I don't think it's been a bad month. I think I've done well to resist temptation. And then looking forward into next month, honestly, I think it's going to be the same. I think if the planting the seeds goes well, I'm going to have to continue to resist that temptation for doing other things. And I don't think the desire for me to continue evolving my wardrobe will ever go away. So I think I just need to keep in my head about when is it the right time? When will buying things work, that they will last and it won't be a waste of money, basically. And that's where we are at with that. And so I will wrap this one up. Thank you so much for watching another video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to give it a thumbs up, and you can subscribe if you're not already. I will see you in another video very soon. Until next time, God bless. Take care.